The shadow in the mirror. Chapter 1. The move. I stepped out of the taxi, gazing at the Victorian house before me with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The old oak trees surrounding it cast long shadows across the lawn, as if guarding secrets within their twisted limbs. I had never lived in such an enormous place alone before, always sharing rooms with roommates or family members. But now, after finally earning my degree, it was time to embrace independence. This house seemed to whisper stories of a different era. Its turrets and stained glass windows told tales of a bygone age that both thrilled and unsettled me. The wooden door creaked as I pushed it open with trembling hands, carrying 2 suitcases into the foyer that echoed my footsteps. As I set them down, I felt an inexplicable chill in the air despite the summer breeze outside. The realtor's directions had led me here on a whim, and I couldn't resist the allure of this relic from another age. Jessa Wilder was finally starting her adult life in room 213 on Elmwood Street. The house had needed restoration work for years, so it was to be expected that some things might still linger behind walls. I took a deep breath, stepping further into the dark hallway where cobwebs hung like delicate lace curtains. A strange feeling of being watched pressed upon my skin, but surely it was just the old building's silence. The air carried the scent of aged books and forgotten memories. As dusk fell, casting long shadows across walls painted with faded portraits, I began to explore. In the kitchen, the faucet dripped a steady rhythm into an overflowing sink, while in other rooms, curtains billowed from windows left unlatched by nature or time itself. Shadows danced across walls, cast by the fading light of day. My heart thumped as I approached the living room with its massive mirror, large enough to fill a wall, hanging over the fireplace. It reflected nothing but myself, yet something made my gaze linger, an inescapable sense that it watched, waiting. A shiver swept down my spine at the thought of being alone here for now. As darkness crept outside, I lit candles to light up the shadows and tried to shake off a growing unease. In this vast space with echoes of laughter long gone, my footsteps sounded hollow on the hardwood floorboards. That night, exhausted from packing and unpacking, I fell asleep in bed wearing a bathrobe to protect against the eerie quiet. Just as dreams began to entwine themselves around me, a scream pierced through the stillness. It was then, my room door slamming shut. Heart pounding, I sprang up. The mirror's frame glistened in fading moonlight, reflecting shadows where there shouldn't be any. A figure? My imagination? I approached cautiously. As I drew near, it froze, a reflection of me with shadowed eyes peering back. Not my own. I reached out, and the image wavered, turning its head to face mine before vanishing into darkness. The room held breathless silence. I retreated to my bed, pulse racing under sheets that clung to sweat-beaded skin. In the morning light, the reflection was as it should be, me unblemished by any ghostly visitors. I steeled myself for a long day of unpacking, and in doing so, tried not to dwell on the bizarre encounter. But the mirror held my attention all too often that day. It wasn't just the shape shifting. Once I made eye contact with it, objects would disappear, sometimes reappear. This peculiar behavior kept me at an arm's length from exploring further. With each passing hour, shadows seemed to move beyond my sight lines. A door shut, then reopened by itself in a distant room upstairs. In the kitchen, utensils clattered without any hands holding them. Shadows skittered behind blinds and curtains like phantoms dancing just out of reach. Night brought no peace as I heard the front door open. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, drawing near my chamber door with unmistakable deliberation. Heart hammering in my ears, I held a breath as it opened. Not that anyone would be visiting at such an ungodly hour. A black shape entered and moved in silence. My pulse rocketed as shadowy fingers brushed against the doorframe. In the mirror's silvered glass, a silhouette of myself stood, its eyes dark orbs. The creature turned to face me, my face with a mouth agape. It reached out, and I backed away. Hands grasped for something. A mirror shard shattered on the floor when it missed, shards reflecting my pale skin. My gaze met those unblinking black dots. Then, it vanished into darkness as suddenly as it appeared. Breath caught in my throat. I stared at the scattered glass until it was just me reflected, shaking like autumn leaves before the wind. The figure reappeared, this time beside me. It mirrored each of my movements, and we shared a silent dance between the bed and doorframe. Its form began to blur. I stumbled backward as the reflection turned opaque black. A cold hand brushed against my cheek, and an icy breath touched the skin there before vanishing into a wisp of darkness that coalesced into a dark figure in the corner of the room, just out of arm's reach. It watched me with eyes that seemed to bore holes through the mirror. My mind wrestled between reality and dreamless sleeplessness. It was impossible, yet I couldn't deny what my staring eyes confirmed. Chapter 2. The Reflection. Shadows danced outside my window when night returned, their forms twisting. I didn't know what kind of ghost or entity this was, if a spirit at all, but I needed to leave. Morning light chased the darkness away with sunbeams through the blinds and the oppressive atmosphere. As I prepared coffee in the kitchen, a door slammed shut upstairs. On my second cup, it happened again. I decided to investigate. Each room led me to the study on the third floor. The room was empty except for an antique mirror propped on an ornate desk amid stacks of books and papers, as if someone had left their life in haste. My fingers hovered over the glass before tracing its frame, but nothing else stirred. A low sigh escaped my lips. Maybe this house wasn't haunted after all. I moved into the loft above it that night, trying to find solace under thick blankets, only to wake up at 3 a.m. shattering darkness pressed against the doorframe of my room. Black as coal, it moved swiftly behind me, silent and swift, following me through reflections. I sprinted toward the study where I first spotted it, hoping this was some cruel trick of sleep deprivation or nightmares made tangible. In the loft now, it appeared in every mirror, a sliver of darkness that always kept pace with me. Every door slammed shut behind my fleeing form, until I stood before the old desk and locked myself within the study room. The figure materialized at the desk as I approached, eyes dark as coal met mine. It leaned closer with each step I took. In this sanctuary of dusty tomes, we faced off under flickering lamplight. With trembling fingers, I reached out, hesitant, and my palm connected with cool glass before a black form solidified behind me. "What do you want?" It rose to its feet in the room, tall and imposing, an eerie silhouette, and took the shape of a woman from another era. A long skirt clung to her legs as if still soaked in blood, and hair that spilled like night over shoulders that seemed designed for darkness. Her eyes flickered. Then she spoke with a voice like the wind through dead leaves. "Your name is not spoken aloud." She vanished, leaving me trembling. The reflection moved behind me once more, drawing closer. I spun around, and there it stood before me in this room, no longer a shadow, a woman clothed in blood-stained garments. I stared at the mirror. She leaned over its edge, peering back with eyes that pierced. A gust of wind carried the word run from those lips. With every footstep away from the desk, her form detached from the glass and moved in tandem. She didn't follow me out into night. Her dark hair billowed like smoke behind a hooded head as she crossed the loft to face me, eyes burning black coal, in a voice that could shatter glass. "You should run." I spun. There was no back door here. She clutched the desk and turned toward the window. My window. The wind picked up outside. A floorboard creaked below. An unnatural breeze swept in from somewhere. My legs bore me to the ground as the mirror's surface rippled like water, swirling darkness above her form. In a flash of night clothes and hair, she stepped through glass shards that had once littered my bedroom, and shattered them all when she landed on both feet. We met eyes in the study room as blackness coalesced around us. It was now a woman in raven attire amidst the bookshelf shadows, her gaze unblinking. "Who are you?" I asked, voice barely audible. She whispered through the glass, the sound more felt than heard. "I am trapped." The creature slid into shadow as swiftly as she had emerged. It whispered of ancient pain and a name that was never called aloud. As my hand touched her shoulder, she reformed in tattered black attire, blood-stained skirts clinging to legs. Her eyes flashed with something akin to despair before turning an obsidian void under the low light of a moonbeam breaking through the loft window. Name spoken aloud, "You'll be free." In that moment I knew it was more than just an apparition. What had bound her here so long ago? As I faced her, the room turned as dark as the glass that held us captive. When moonlight returned, she offered a trembling hand and in a hoarse voice spoke, "Euphemia." On a breath, she vanished. The desk reflected me with a gasping sigh. When Euphemia emerged, her features echoed mine. A doppelganger of myself, with a hooded head. Chapter 3. The Truth. By the time I could breathe again, darkness clung to the walls and she to my side. In this room, shadows danced in an eerie dance to Euphemia's movements. They seemed to follow her as we fled downstairs together, her black clothes echoing my own. "What binds you?" Her voice was a lament that echoed between us in each other's presence. As I fumbled for keys, she seized my hand and we walked out into the day with Euphemia at my heels, passing through glass. The woman's raven-haired form turned to meet mine in a gaze full of longing for escape. "Speak your name aloud." My voice shook but rang like metal. "Ada?" No matter how hard I tried over days, it had been silence until now. Euphemia's face shifted from my own in sorrow and fear as the wind returned outside. Her form blurred into mine before it was swallowed by shadowy tendrils that wrapped around us. In the kitchen, we sipped coffee together, a woman of blood-stained fabric against the backdrop of black garments meeting me with a knowing smile. She'd been trapped for 100 years behind glass, a ghost in her own reflection. The wind howled as Euphemia whispered secrets and tales of sorrow. Each word felt like 1,000 razors across my skin. On the final night, she spoke louder than I had ever heard anything before. My name aloud, as if called by an unseen force. A blast of air burst in from the reflection behind her. The figure in black and blood melted into shadow. My eyes were left to stare at the shards that once held us apart. It was just me now, gasping on the floor. I ran outside. In the dawn's first light, all that remained of my double clung to a broken piece of glass. Euphemia, finally free after what she called a century. with a gaze of hope and sorrow both at once as she turned back into the wind. In her wake, an odd calm crept in. I'd freed her from the glass prison. But at what cost? The kitchen door was still locked shut where shadows should have parted. My fingers traced where I felt them tracing mine. They were there too when I looked down. I stared at black nails with dark eyes reflecting my own, and I knew then that we were now one, a mirror of blood-stained darkness. I am you now. I could feel it. There was no more Aria as the last shards fell from my fingertips. The woman was not gone, but had become me. Euphemia had found peace in death. The floor beneath our feet began to shudder like an ancient, wooden heart as my reflection whispered back, I am you now. And with that knowledge, I felt it. I knew we were one soul, forever trapped between two worlds, the echo of a woman's sorrow. In the end, no matter how hard Aria tried, Euphemia could never be free. But if there was any solace in her century, that long imprisonment, it came as the wood creaked and shuddered under my feet like an ancient heart beating. The floorboards began to give way beneath us, a mirror of darkness on its surface that bore no reflection, save for one, the shadow of our shared torment. Two worlds locked between one soul. When I'd lost myself in Euphemia's sorrow, when there was just darkness and blood-stained fabric clinging to my form, she spoke a single word. Euphemia. The floorboards gave way, swallowing us whole as if into the heart of that wood. In its depths, all became silent, for a moment or an eternity, before we rose together, forever linked in our shadowed prison within that ancient home. And when at last I opened my eyes to find myself back on the bedroom floor, I was not sure what she'd left behind and what had stayed with her, or if I still held any of what I used to call me, Aria. I lay there, drenched in my own blood from the shattered shards, with no reflection.